Aboard the grand alien warship, the humbling silence of the bridge was broken by the arrival of a human envoy. The vast expanse of the ship stretched behind them, its dark hull glowing with the eerie lights of a distant nebula. The sleek, metallic walls were adorned with symbols from across the galaxy, but today there was only one name on everyone's mind: Captain Eli Walker, a human. Princess Sira stood at the center of the bridge, her posture regal as she awaited the arrival of the human. At 19 years old, she had already been groomed to rule over her people. Her species, the Valorians, were an ancient, proud race known for their fierce warriors and their superiority complex. For centuries, they had conquered and ruled planets across the galaxy, and now they held dominion over a massive empire. But today, Sira wasn't just a princess. Today, she was the future of her people, and she would ensure that humanity would bow to the might of the Valorians. As the heavy metallic doors to the bridge slid open, Captain Walker stepped inside. He was tall, with a posture of strength and confidence. Yet there was a certain calmness to him that made him stand out. His human eyes scanned the room, taking in the alien council surrounding him, and then he focused on Princess Sira. The air grew tense. His presence was a contradiction. Out of place, yet oddly commanding. Sira studied him, feeling the familiar rush of superiority she always felt when meeting with lesser beings. The humans were a strange, relatively young species in the galactic order. They were ambitious, but they lacked the strength and intelligence of the Valorians. To her, the humans had always been a curiosity, nothing more than a minor inconvenience in the grand scheme of the universe. "You must be Captain Walker," she said, her voice cool and firm. She walked toward him with grace, her sharp eyes never leaving his face. "I expected more from your people. Your kind is primitive, unrefined, and frankly beneath us. But I suppose it's admirable you even made it this far." Walker met her gaze, his eyes hardening for a brief moment. But instead of responding with the anger Sira had expected, he said nothing. He simply stood there, silent. Sira raised an eyebrow, surprised by his calmness. It wasn't the reaction she had anticipated. She had expected him to retaliate, to become defensive, to shout back in anger. Instead, the human remained still, as though her words didn't faze him at all. The silence in the room stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Her council shifted uneasily in their seats, sensing the tension. Sira's lips curled into a small, mocking smile. "You've been given a great honor," she continued, her voice dripping with condescension. "You stand before the future ruler of the Valorian Empire, yet you choose to remain silent. Perhaps it is true that humans are only good for being used as tools after all." Still, Captain Walker said nothing. His eyes remained locked onto hers. There was a quiet strength in him, an unspoken defiance that Sira could not ignore. It made her uneasy, though she would never admit it. With a slow, deliberate movement, Walker reached up and removed his helmet, revealing a face that was both familiar and strange. His features were rugged, yet there was a softness to his eyes that betrayed a deeper compassion. His short, dark hair framed his face, and the scar running down his cheek only added to the ruggedness of his appearance. But it was his silence that unsettled Sira the most. "I've heard much about you, Princess Sira," Walker finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "Your people, your empire, your power. But it seems you've underestimated humans." Sira narrowed her eyes, feeling a sense of irritation rising within her. She had expected him to grovel, to apologize, to beg for mercy. Yet there was nothing. "Underestimate? You?" she scoffed. "You're hardly worth the effort. The galaxy already knows the truth. You're weak. You hide behind your technology and your weapons, pretending to be something you're not. You have no real power, no real purpose." Walker didn't flinch. Instead, he took a step back, slowly and deliberately, as though to distance himself from the tension in the room. He seemed unbothered by her words, as if they were nothing more than a passing breeze. "I see," he said, his tone calm but firm. "You think we're weak? You think we're inferior? But I believe you're mistaken." Princess Sira felt the heat of frustration growing in her chest. How dare this human stand before her as if he were an equal? How dare he challenge the truth she had known her entire life? Her voice grew colder, more biting. "I'm not mistaken. The Valorians have ruled this galaxy for centuries, and we will continue to do so. Your people will never be more than a speck in the vastness of space." At that moment, the unexpected happened. Without another word, Captain Walker turned around, walking away from her and her council. The room fell into a stunned silence, as if the air had been sucked out of it. No one moved. No one spoke. It was as though time had stopped. Sira stood frozen, her mouth slightly open in disbelief. He was leaving? He had just insulted her, mocked her authority, and yet he simply walked away, as though her words meant nothing at all. A murmur spread throughout the council. One of the officers whispered, Did he just walk away?" "Princess," Sira's heart raced. How could this be? How could a human, a species so beneath her own, just walk away from a confrontation with royalty? She had been insulted before by lesser beings, but never like this, never by a human. "Send a squadron to follow him," she commanded, her voice trembling with anger. "I want him brought back here. He will apologize. He will kneel before me." But as the Valorian officers scrambled to carry out her orders, Sira stood still, her mind racing. She had expected everything from this human except for this. She had expected anger. She had expected resistance. She had expected a fight. But this was something she didn't know how to handle. Outside, Captain Walker continued his calm, steady walk down the hallway, as if the galaxy itself were at peace. His steps were deliberate, unhurried. He was a warrior, not of words, but of action. He didn't need to argue. He didn't need to prove anything. And as he walked away from the princess, he wondered if this strange encounter would mark the beginning of something more than just a conflict. Perhaps, he thought, it was the start of an understanding, a true meeting of minds between two very different species. The news spread quickly throughout the Valorian fleet. Captain Walker had insulted Princess Sira, the future ruler of the Valorians, and then simply turned and walked away. The shockwaves of the encounter reached far beyond the confines of the bridge, reaching the ears of every officer and soldier aboard the grand warship. Princess Sira remained in the throne room, her mind racing as the silence of the encounter replayed in her head. The words she had spoken to Captain Walker echoed in her ears, but it was his reaction, or lack thereof, that had left her in turmoil. How could a human act with such indifference? It was as though her words had no weight, no meaning. It was an insult she had never experienced in her life. "Majesty, we must take action," one of her high-ranking officers, Commander Varn, said cautiously, standing by her side. "That human has humiliated you. We cannot allow such behavior to go unpunished." Sira turned to face him, her expression hard. She wanted to lash out, to order her fleet to hunt down Captain Walker and force him to apologize for his disrespect. But something inside her held her back. She couldn't shake the strange feeling that the human silence had somehow been more powerful than her harsh words. It was as though he had seen through her bravado and chosen not to engage in the petty exchange she had been expecting. "Send a squadron to bring him back here," she finally commanded, her voice cold. "He will apologize. He will show respect for his betters." But even as she gave the order, she couldn't help but wonder why she felt so unsettled. She had been the one in control. She was the princess, the future ruler of a vast empire. Yet now, as the minutes turned to hours, a sense of doubt gnawed at her. What was it about Captain Walker that had made her feel so exposed? Elsewhere, aboard the human ship Resolute, Captain Walker stood in his quarters, staring out the window at the stars. The encounter with Princess Sira had been brief, but it had left a lasting impact on him. He had expected hostility, but not the kind of arrogance that had poured from her words. Yet, in a strange way, it had only confirmed his thoughts on the alien race. The Valorians, like many of the other advanced species, saw themselves as superior, and they treated the humans as little more than insects to be crushed beneath their boot heels. But what struck him most was his own reaction, or rather, his lack of reaction. The Valorian princess had expected him to become angry, to defend his honor. Instead, he had simply walked away, unfazed. His actions hadn't been an act of weakness, but rather of strength. He had nothing to prove to her. The silence was his answer. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft chime at the door. He turned to see his second-in-command, Lieutenant Marla. Torres standing in the doorway, her face serious. "Captain, we've just received word from the Valorian fleet. They've sent a squadron to intercept us," she reported. "It looks like they're sending a message." Walker sighed, rubbing his eyes. "What is it this time? Another threat?" "No, sir. It's a diplomatic envoy. Princess Sira is requesting your presence again." Walker raised an eyebrow. This was unexpected. He had assumed that the Valorians would send their fleet to punish him for his insolence. But it seemed Sira had something else in mind. He wondered if the princess had thought better of the situation, or if her pride had driven her to try again. "Prepare the shuttle," he ordered. "Let's see what she wants." Back on the Valorian warship, Sira paced back and forth in her quarters. The image of Captain Walker, walking away from her without a word, had become a symbol of defiance in her mind. She couldn't deny that it had shaken her. The Valorians had never encountered a species like humans before, resilient, stubborn, and surprisingly composed under pressure. She had assumed the humans were simple-minded. She had believed they would crumble under the weight of their inferior status. But now, standing alone in her private chamber, Sira couldn't escape the fact that she had misjudged them. She had made assumptions about their weakness, but she had underestimated their strength. The silence of Captain Walker was not a sign of weakness. It was a sign of self-respect, and that, Sira realized, was what troubled her the most. Her thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of her trusted advisor, General Kalen, who entered with a grave expression. He bowed slightly before speaking. "Princess, the human captain has agreed to meet with you once again. He is on his way." Sira nodded, feeling a mixture of unease and curiosity. She had expected him to beg for mercy, to apologize for his disrespect, but instead he had agreed to meet her again. She wasn't sure if that meant he had realized his mistake, or if he had simply decided that there was something to be gained from a second meeting. "Let him come," she said, her voice steady. "This time we will settle things once and for all." Captain Walker's shuttle landed with a soft hum, the door opening to reveal a cold, sterile hallway. As he walked down the corridor, the tension in the air was palpable. He was well aware of the danger he faced by returning to the Valorian warship. If Princess Sira had not already been humiliated by his actions, she would certainly take this opportunity to exact her revenge. When he entered the throne room, he was met with the gaze of Princess Sira, who stood before him, her expression unreadable. The room was vast, filled with alien artwork and relics from centuries of conquest. Yet it was the princess herself who commanded the most attention. Her beauty was striking, her confidence almost tangible. But there was something else in her eyes, a flicker of something he couldn't quite place. Curiosity, perhaps? Regret? "You came," Sira said, her voice calm but sharp. "I'm surprised." "I'm not," Walker replied, his tone steady. I came because there's more at stake here than just our pride. We both know that. She eyed him warily. More at stake than pride? You speak as if you understand what's truly at stake here. I understand that your people think they're invincible, Walker said, his voice unwavering. But invincibility doesn't last forever, and sooner or later, all empires fall. Sira felt a surge of anger. You're not in a position to lecture me, human. You don't know what it means to rule. You don't know what it takes to build an empire. I don't need to, Walker replied. I know what it takes to protect what matters, and I know what it means to fight for something bigger than yourself. You're not the only one with something to lose. There was a moment of silence between them, an unspoken understanding passing through the air. Sira found herself staring at the human before her, seeing him not as an enemy, but as something else, something more. Captain Walker left the throne room with a sense of quiet victory. He had not come to the Valorian ship expecting to win, but he had accomplished something. Princess Sira had seen a side of him that she hadn't expected, and for the first time, she might just be reconsidering her view of humanity. But as Walker walked back to his ship, he couldn't help but wonder, would she be able to truly change? Or would her pride and arrogance be her undoing? Days passed after Captain Walker's second meeting with Princess Sira, and the tension between the two continued to grow. Neither of them had expected the other to act with such composure. Sira, still proud and unyielding, had returned to her royal duties, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the human captain. His calm demeanor had shaken her in a way she hadn't anticipated, and for the first time in her life she was left questioning what true strength really meant. Walker, on the other hand, had returned to his ship, resolute, and continued his mission to maintain peace between the human colonies and the Valorian Empire. Yet something had shifted within him as well. His meeting with Sira hadn't just been about strategy or power. It had been something deeper, something he hadn't expected to find in an alien princess. He couldn't deny that there was more to her than the arrogance she displayed. Underneath her royal facade, there was a vulnerability he could see, if only for a brief moment. As the days wore on, the uneasy silence between the two powers remained. Both sides continued their respective duties, but there was a tension hanging in the air. Neither of them had been able to forget the other. One morning, as Walker stood on the bridge of Resolute, gazing out at the vast expanse of space, his second in command, Lieutenant Marla Torres entered the room. She had a concerned look on her face, something that caught Walker's attention immediately. "Captain, we've just received word from the Valorian fleet," she said, her voice tense. "They've sent a diplomatic envoy. It seems Princess Sira wants to meet again." Walker's eyes narrowed. He had expected the Valorians to take a more aggressive approach. A diplomatic meeting was a surprise. It was clear that Sira was still interested in something, perhaps an alliance, or maybe she just wanted to prove that the humans were no match for her empire. "I see," Walker said, his voice calm. "Prepare the shuttle. We'll go meet her." Back on the Valorian warship, Princess Sira stood in her chambers, staring out at the stars through the massive windows of her private quarters. The galaxy was vast, and yet it felt so small to her now. She had always believed in the superiority of the Valorians, and for most of her life she had been certain that no one could challenge them. But something about the human, Captain Walker, had unsettled her. He was not like the others. He wasn't afraid to face her, nor was he intimidated by her title. Her advisor, General Kalen, entered the room, his footsteps heavy on the marble floor. "Majesty, the human captain has agreed to meet with you once again," he said, bowing slightly. "His ship will arrive shortly." Sira nodded, her expression thoughtful. She had not expected Walker to return after their last meeting. Perhaps it was his bravery that had drawn her in, or maybe it was his unspoken challenge. Whatever it was, she felt a curiosity about him that she had never felt for anyone before. "Prepare the throne room," she commanded. "I want to speak with him alone." When Captain Walker's shuttle landed on the Valorian warship once again, the tension was palpable. As he stepped out, his boots making a soft clink on the metal floor, he was greeted by a squad of Valorian soldiers. They did not speak, but their presence was enough to show that this meeting was important. Walker followed the soldiers through the grand halls of the Valorian warship, his mind racing. He had no idea what Princess Sira wanted this time. After their last encounter, he had hoped that she would begin to see that humans were not the weak, primitive species she had assumed them to be. But now, as he approached her throne room once more, he felt a sense of unease. This could be a trap, or it could be another chance for the Valorians to test the humans. The massive doors of the throne room opened before him, and there, standing, at the far end of the room, was Princess Sira. She was dressed in a flowing gown of shimmering silver, her regal presence almost overwhelming. Her eyes locked onto Walker as he entered, and for a moment, neither of them moved. "Captain Walker," Sira's voice broke the silence. "Thank you for coming again." Walker nodded, his gaze steady. "Princess Sira, I didn't expect another invitation." Sira's eyes flickered with something, surprise, perhaps? She stepped forward, her movements graceful, yet deliberate. "You've surprised me. You are unlike any human I've met before. Most of your kind would have backed down by now. But you continue to challenge me." "I don't challenge you," Walker said, his voice calm. "I'm simply here because I believe there's something worth fighting for." Sira studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. She had expected him to say something else, something that fit the stereotype she had built in her mind about humans. But he didn't. His words were simple, direct, and honest. "Perhaps we can learn something from each other," she said, her tone softening just slightly. "I've always believed that the Valorians are the superior species. We've conquered worlds, built empires, and ruled with strength. But your kind, you fight in a way I can't understand. You fight for more than just power. You fight for something deeper." Walker didn't speak right away. He simply looked at her, noticing the change in her demeanor. There was a vulnerability there now, one that hadn't been present before. The princess, who had once mocked him, was now speaking to him as an equal. "Strength isn't always about power," he said slowly. "It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard. It's about fighting for the people you care about and for the future you want to build." Sira's gaze softened for a moment, and she stepped closer. "Then teach me. Teach me what it means to fight for something more than just strength and pride." Walker didn't expect the request. It was unexpected, and it made him pause. He had come to the Valorian warship thinking he was here to negotiate a treaty, to broker peace. But now he saw something different in Princess Sira, something human. She wanted to learn. She wanted to understand what made humans different from the rest of the galaxy. "I don't have all the answers, Princess," Walker said, his voice firm but gentle. "But I can show you what I've learned." For the first time, Sira smiled, though it was faint. It was there. It was a smile that spoke of something new, something unspoken. Perhaps it was the beginning of understanding, the first real step toward peace. As the meeting came to a close, both Sira and Walker felt something change between them. It wasn't a sudden shift, but a slow, gradual understanding that began to form. They were no longer enemies, nor were they allies. They were something new. Two individuals from two very different worlds, trying to understand each other. As Walker left the throne room, he couldn't shake the feeling that the princess he had once seen as a proud, untouchable ruler was now someone he could relate to. She had allowed herself to be vulnerable, to question everything she had been taught. And in doing so, she had opened a door to something more than just an alliance, something that could change the fate of both their people. And as for Princess Sira, she watched Walker leave with a strange sense of wonder. She had always thought that strength was about control, about dominance. But now she realized that true. Strength might be about letting go, about learning, growing, and perhaps trusting in something beyond her own power. The days following Captain Walker's last meeting with Princess Sira were filled with uneasy anticipation. Both sides knew that something had changed between them. But the question remained, what would that change mean? Was it the start of a new era of peace, or just a brief moment of understanding before the old tensions and pride flared up again? On the Valorian warship, Princess Sira stood before a large window, gazing out into the cold depths of space. Her fingers brushed against the cool glass, as though trying to touch something she couldn't quite grasp. The words, Captain Walker, had spoken to her echoed in her mind, and for the first time, she questioned everything she had known about strength and power. Was her empire really as invincible as she had been taught? Was her belief in the superiority of her people truly justified? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. She turned to see General Kalen entering the room, his face grim. He didn't need to say a word for Sira to understand that something had happened. The air around them seemed to thicken with the tension of the moment. "Princess," Kalen said, his voice low, "we've just received disturbing news. A rogue faction within the Valorian fleet has launched an attack on a human colony near the border. They've ignored your orders to maintain peace." Sira felt a sharp pang of anger, quickly followed by a sinking feeling in her stomach. This was the very thing she had feared. There were always factions within her empire that sought to regain the old ways, the old conquests, and this rogue faction was more than just a threat. It was a challenge to everything she had tried to build. "This cannot stand," Sira said, her voice hardening. "They are defying my authority, and they will be punished. I will not let them ruin what we've worked for." Kalen nodded, but there was something in his eyes that made Sira pause. He seemed hesitant, almost reluctant. "To speak, what is it, General?" she asked, sensing that there was more. Kalen took a deep breath before speaking. "There are reports that Captain Walker and his fleet are already responding. He's heading to the colony to defend it. We may be on the brink of war." Sira's eyes widened. She had hoped that the humans would continue their quiet resistance, focusing on peace rather than retaliation. But now, it seemed, they were ready to fight back. "I'll meet with him," Sira said, her voice cold with determination. "We can't let this escalate. If we don't act now, everything we've worked for will be destroyed." On the Resolute, Captain Walker stared at the screen in front of him, watching the flashing red dots indicating the location of the rogue Valorian fleet. The news of the attack had come as a shock, but Walker had seen the signs. The rogue factions were always a threat, a constant danger lurking in the background of peace. He had hoped that Sira could keep them in check, but now, it seemed, the test had come. It was time to prove that humanity wasn't just about surviving, it was about fighting for what was right. "Lieutenant Torres," Walker said, his voice steady, "set course for the Valorian colony. We're going to stop this before it gets worse." "Aye, Captain," Torres responded, her fingers flying over the console as she began inputting the coordinates. Walker turned and looked out the window, watching as the stars streaked past. He had never wanted war. He had never wanted to fight against the Valorians. But this was different. This wasn't about pride or power. It was about protecting the innocent. And that was something he would never stand down from. Hours later, both Sira and Walker's ships arrived at the same human colony, now under attack by Valorian forces. The once peaceful settlement was now in chaos, with fires burning in the distance and the sounds of blaster fire echoing across the empty streets. The human defenders were outnumbered, but they fought fiercely, refusing to give in. Walker's heart ached as he saw the destruction. He had hoped for a peaceful solution, but now it was clear that peace was slipping further away with each passing second. Sira's ship hovered above the battlefield, her gaze fixed on the human defenses below. She could feel the weight of the decision she had to make. As the future ruler of the Valorians, she had always believed in the power of strength, but now, in the face of this chaos, she questioned whether her people's strength was the right answer. Was this really what she wanted for her empire? Was this how she wanted her legacy to be remembered? "General Kalen," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "give the order to land. We must speak to Captain Walker, now." Walker watched as the Valorian warship descended toward the colony. He had expected this. Sira would come, of course, but he wasn't sure what kind of meeting this would be. He had hoped that they could prevent further bloodshed, but now he wondered if they were both too far gone to stop the fighting. Still, he would do everything in his power to make her see that there was another way. As the ships landed on the war-torn soil, Sira stepped out of the hatch, flanked by her soldiers. She was met by Walker, who stood tall, his face hardened, but still calm. The tension between them was palpable. Both were warriors, both were leaders, and yet both knew that this moment would define everything. "Captain," Sira said, her voice firm, but not without a trace of uncertainty. "This must end. We cannot allow this rebellion to destroy everything we've worked for." "I agree," Walker replied, his eyes scanning the battlefield. "But your people didn't just attack a colony. They attacked the very idea of peace. This isn't just about stopping a rogue faction. It's about stopping the idea that power is the only thing that matters." Sira looked at him, her eyes narrowing. "And what do you propose? That we simply let them go? That we let them live? To fight another day? No," Walker said, shaking his head. "But we can't fight fire with fire. If we do, we'll only burn ourselves. We have to stop this without more bloodshed. We can show them that there's a better way." Sira studied him for a long moment, as though weighing his words. The silence stretched between them, thick with the weight of the decision at hand. She had always been taught that strength was the answer, but Walker's words made her wonder if there was another path, one that didn't rely on domination and power. "What do you suggest, Captain?" Sira asked, her voice softer now. "We unite," Walker said simply. "We fight together, not as enemies, but as allies. We stop the rogue faction together, and we show both our people that there's a way to coexist." Sira hesitated. Her mind raced with the implications of such an action. Could she trust the humans? Could she trust herself to take such a risk? For the first time in her life, she wasn't sure. But as she looked into Walker's eyes, she saw something she hadn't expected. Trust, respect, and perhaps, for the first time, a real chance for peace. "We'll do it your way," she said, her voice steady. Together, they turned to face the battlefield ahead of them. This was not just a test of strength, it was a test of belief. And as the two armies prepared to unite against a common enemy, both Sira and Walker knew that this moment would change everything. The Valorian warship and the human fleet stood side by side, facing the remnants of the rogue faction that had attacked the human colony. The battle was over, but the scars it left behind were deep. Fires still burned in the distance, and the once peaceful colony now lay in ruins. Yet amidst the chaos there was something new, a sense of hope, of possibility, that had never been there before. Captain Walker and Princess Sira stood together on the bridge of the Valorian warship, looking out at the battlefield below. The sounds of the cleanup effort echoed through the ship's corridors, but for the first time, neither of them felt the weight of their roles as leaders. Instead, they shared something more, a bond that had formed between them in the heat of the battle. Sira, who had once believed in the absolute power of her empire, now found herself questioning everything she had been taught. She had always known that the Valorians were strong, that they had ruled the galaxy for centuries, but that strength had always been about control, about domination. And now, after fighting alongside the humans, she had seen a different kind of strength, the kind that came from trust, from unity. "We did it," Walker said, breaking the silence. His voice was soft, but filled with a sense of accomplishment. "We stopped the rogue faction. We fought together, and we won." Sira turned to him, her eyes reflecting a mix of emotions. She had been trained her entire life to lead with power, to command respect through strength. But now, as she looked at Walker, she saw something else, something that she had never truly understood before. True leadership wasn't about commanding others to obey. It was about guiding them, working together to build something better. "I never thought it would be possible," Sira admitted, her voice quiet. "I never thought the Valorians could work with humans, much less trust them." Walker smiled, though there was a sadness in his eyes. "It wasn't easy. We've both had our doubts, our fears. But we've learned that there's more to life than just power. There's respect and trust, and that's what we've built here today." The two of them stood side by side, watching, as their fleets continued to work together, helping the human survivors and ensuring that the rogue faction's forces were fully dismantled. The contrast between the two armies was striking. The Valorian warriors, fierce and proud, working alongside the humans, whose resilience and courage had proven to be just as strong. Back at the human colony, the survivors gathered to rebuild their homes, families that had once been torn apart. By the war were now coming together, sharing stories of survival, of hope. And standing in the center of it all, Captain Walker and Princess Sira spoke to their people. Walker addressed the humans first, his voice strong and clear. "Today we've shown that we're not just survivors. We're builders. We're creators. Together, we've shown that no matter how different we are, we can come together for the common good. The war is not over, but we've taken the first step toward peace. And that step is one that we'll take together." The humans cheered, their spirits lifted by the words of their leader. Walker had always been a man of action, but today he was something more. Today he was a symbol of what humanity could achieve when they worked together. Next, it was Sira's turn. She stepped forward, her regal presence commanding attention. "I stand before you today not as a princess of the Valorians, but as someone who has seen the true strength of humanity. I have seen the way you fight, not for power, but for your people, for your future. You have taught me something I never thought I would understand. Strength is not about domination. It's about unity. It's about trust. And it is with that trust that we will build a new future, one where Valorians and humans stand side by side." The Valorian soldiers, who had once looked at humans with disdain, now watched with respect. They too had witnessed the courage of the human soldiers, and they now understood that strength came in many forms. The applause that followed was not just for the words spoken, but for the promise of something greater, the promise of a new era. One where the lines between species no longer defined them, but where cooperation and trust would guide their future. In the weeks that followed, Princess Sira and Captain Walker worked together to ensure that the peace held. The rogue faction had been defeated, but the real battle was just beginning. It was one thing to end a war, but it was another to build a lasting peace. And that would require more than just military might. It would require trust, understanding, and the willingness to change. Sira returned to the Valorian capital, where she called a council of the Empire's leaders. For the first time in her life, she was not surrounded by those who only sought power. Instead, she was among those who, like her, had seen the possibility of something new. "My people have always believed in the power of strength," Sira said, addressing the council. But now I see that true strength lies not in domination, but in cooperation. I have seen the humans, their resilience, their courage. They may not be as advanced as we are, but they are no less capable. It is time for us to build a new future, one where we work together, not as conquerors and conquered, but as equals. There were murmurs among the council members. Some looked uneasy, others skeptical. But Sira stood firm. She knew that this would not be easy. There would be those who resisted change, who clung to the old ways. But she also knew that the future of the Valorian Empire depended on it. "We will send emissaries to the human colonies," she continued. "We will build alliances, not through force, but through mutual respect. We will work together to create a future where our people can thrive, side by side." The council remained silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, they nodded. Sira could see the uncertainty in their eyes, but she also saw the glimmer of hope. This was not just her vision. It was now the vision of the entire Valorian Empire. Meanwhile, on the human side of the galaxy, Walker stood before his people, preparing them for what lay ahead. The war had ended, but the real work had just begun. "We have a chance to build something greater than ourselves," he said to the gathered crowd. "We have a chance to show the galaxy what humanity is capable of. We're not just survivors of war, we're builders of peace. And we're going to show the Valorians that peace is possible, even between two very different species." Walker's words were not just a call to action. They were a promise that humanity, though young and often underestimated, could rise to meet the challenges ahead. And with Princess Sira's help, they would create a new era of cooperation, of peace, and of understanding. As the days turned into weeks, the first steps toward this new future were taken. The Valorian Empire and the human colonies began to exchange ideas, share resources, and build the foundations for a lasting peace. It was not easy, and it was not without its challenges, but both sides were committed to the journey ahead. Princess Sira and Captain Walker continued to work together, their partnership growing stronger with each passing day. What had begun as a tense and uncertain relationship had transformed into something much more, a true alliance. An alliance built not on the promise of power, but on the strength of mutual respect and the belief that together they could achieve something greater than either could alone. And as the stars twinkled in the vastness of space, Sira and Walker stood together, watching the horizon of a new era unfold. A future where strength was not measured by domination, but by the ability to come together and build something lasting. A future where humanity and the Valorians would no longer be enemies, but partners in the journey toward a better tomorrow.